We have some very good Bible lessons that are being studied in some of our small groups. And so we had some discussion about, well, how can we communicate some of the great truths of these lessons and do it also in a group environment. And our Disciple Life small groups are designed for a little different nuance or purpose than like a small group meeting. But Adam and I thought, well, let's try to see how we can do in communicating these wonderful Bible truths that all of us really are learning from and can benefit from as we are becoming disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ. So it's a little trial and error. This is the lessons that some of our small groups, all of our small groups are studying. And we're teaching it in a larger group setting, but we want it to have a small group feel. So feel free to add, to participate. We're going to give, Adam's going to give a sort of a Reader's Digest version of the lesson. He's going to help us hit the high points of the Bible truth and the Bible lesson that we want to learn tonight. And then we're going to come back and just have some dialogue and some questions about that. And so we might tweak it a little as we move along, but thank you for being a part of it, and thank you for being here this evening. So, Adam, introduce our Bible study to us tonight.
Well, last week we talked about Lazarus. And who recalled what happened to Lazarus? Okay. He died, right? But that wasn't the end of the story, was it? He rose again. Okay. So, what we're going to be doing is taking that story a little further and seeing what happened after that. And so we're going to be in John chapter 12. Now, who doesn't have a book? This is on page 8 in our book. Okay, more books are coming. I'm going to get Holly to make us some more books, and we'll have those for next week. I should have them by Wednesday. But, and this is on page 8 in our book. So let's look at John 12, verses 1 through 11. But before I get started with that, do y'all remember what you got 2 Christmases ago? What kind of gifts you got? Somebody asked me that. Candace will go, we'll go back and forth. Do you remember what I got you like 2 or 3 Christmases ago? And how many people don't really remember what they got? You can't tell me, can you? But, okay, if you're married in here, when do you remember your engagement? Who remembers the engagement? Okay, a couple people? Yeah?
When we got engaged?
Well, yeah. When you got the ring. All that kind of stuff. There you go. She gave you that? Okay. I must have missed the boat on that one. Okay? There you go. What? But you remember that, right? Why do you think you remember that? Because it's a tangible expression of love, isn't it? So we're going to be talking about the gift that Mary gives to Jesus tonight and how people are talking about it still to this day. We're talking about it and what that really means and what it really means to us. So let's read real quickly the first 11 verses. I'll read it. It says, Then 6 days before the Passover, Jesus came to Bethany, where Lazarus was who had been dead, whom he had raised from the dead. There they made him a supper, and Martha served, but Lazarus was one of those who sat at the table with him. Then Mary took a pound of very costly oil of spikenard, anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the oil. But one of his disciples, Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, who would betray him, said, Why was this fragrant oil not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? This, he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief, and he had the money box, and he used to take what was put in it. But Jesus said, Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. For the poor you have with you always, but me you do not have always. Now, a great many of the Jews knew that he was there, and they came, not for Jesus' sake, but that they might also see Lazarus, whom he had raised from the dead. But the chief priests plotted to put Lazarus to death also, because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed in Jesus. So what did Mary do? What was the gift that she gave Jesus? Right. The whole thing, right? She poured the whole thing out. Was this cheap? It was pretty expensive, wasn't it? Do you think she was carrying around with this all the time? I think you mentioned that a few weeks ago. She probably basically had this with her. This was an actual Indian oil, correct? So this was from far off.
From the Himalayas.
From the Himalayas. So this was expensive. One of the things that we want to look at first is the fact that Mary's gift is a reminder of his impending death. John includes many of the markers in his retelling of these events that force us to see the act against the background of the sacrificial death of Jesus. What did he say in verse 7? Let her alone. She has kept this for the day of my burial. So this is going to be in the context, the backdrop of what's going to be happening. Right? So before we read about the gift, we're told of a secret meeting. Going back just a little bit to chapter 11, verse 53. It says, then from that day on, they plotted to put him to death. So they have this secret meeting. These religious guys are having this secret meeting, and they're already plotting to kill Jesus. What did we read at the end of this? They're also plotting to kill Lazarus. But why is that such a big issue? Why do they want these guys dead? Does it say? That's right. Because on account of him, many of the Jews went away and believed Jesus. So this is a reminder. Mary's gift is a reminder of his impending death, but what they want to do to them. Not only to Jesus, but to Lazarus. So the next thing I want to talk about, it being a reminder of his impending death, but it's a picture of extravagant love. The gift amounted to a Roman pound, which converts to between 11 and 12 ounces, about the size of a can of soda. I'm on page 9. John describes it as expensive. So he's giving you commentary on what's going on here throughout this. So he's saying it's expensive, and it's equivalent to a lot of money. It was about a day's wage for the average worker, or what is it, cost of 1 year's salary, almost. And the gift is pure, it's not imitation, right? He's trying to make that point that it's very pure. And her gift reminds us of the surpassing value of Jesus Christ. She realizes it's worth everything to give all to Jesus. That's what I want to get from this section. Is it worth all of you to give to Jesus? Do we do that? Who can say in here that I've given everything to Christ? But that's what she's illustrating here. It's her love for Jesus. She's pouring that out for him. She doesn't care that it's expensive, because giving yourself to Christ, it's going to cost you. Can I get an amen on that? It's going to cost you. But are you afraid to do that? I will tell you right now, I fought for a long time to commit myself fully to Christ. And it was a constant battle to look at what he's calling me to do. And I'm saying, God, I can't do that. How many of you have ever said that before? God's calling you something, and you say, I can't do it. Right? I don't know if I can give my all to you. You know, what if I do? What is it going to cost me? We all have that question at one point in our lives, do we not? But what about the blessing that you get from taking that and saying what Isaiah in chapter 6, he said, what did he say, if y'all recall? When God's talking about who's going to send me? I mean, who's going to send? Who's going to go for us? He says, send me, right? Can we fully commit ourselves to Christ? Everybody in here can. It's a willingness on our part to do so. And what go ahead.
It's not like if we fully give to him, fully commit to him, it's not like we're on the losing end of the deal.
Right, exactly. We're not on the losing end of the deal, right?
It's like when I go to churches sometimes and I teach stewardship, I tell people, I'm not here to teach you to give till it hurts.
Yeah.
I'm here to teach you to give till it feels good.
That's a good point.
Till you can lay your head on your pillow at night, have peace in your heart, joy in your life, that you've done what God wanted you to do. And when you give him your all, it is true. What this lesson teaches us is that serving Jesus cost us. It cost us extravagant. It cost us our all. But just as it costs to serve Jesus, it also pays to serve Jesus. And I've never heard anybody say, let me put it this way. I've never heard anyone say, I sure am sorry I gave my life to Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, think about
it. It's
true. I've heard a lot of people say it's the best thing I ever did. But I've never heard anybody, boy, I regret the day I got saved.
Has anybody ever heard that? I regret that. No. You don't. So this is what it looks like for her. What does it look like in your life? What does it look like in your life when you lay down everything? Because he's laid down everything for you. Right? He's laid his life down. What more could he do?
And it also touches a little bit, that truth that you're teaching sort of coincides with the verse I really didn't talk about this morning, but I've read each Sunday for the last 3 weeks, where in that same context where Paul's talking about be not conformed to this world, he talks about present your bodies a living sacrifice.
Absolutely.
A sacrifice is that's the ultimate cost. But we're to be a living sacrifice. He's talking in that context about giving everything to Jesus. And, you asked a question just a moment ago, have you ever given everything to Jesus? And it's not something that we bring and pour on him like Mary did. This is the truth is in the story that it was extravagant, it was costly, but I'll never forget the first car I had, the first automobile I had. The Lord started teaching me this lesson that everything that we have is the Lord's and belongs to the Lord. And my youth pastor, I remember the first car I had was a Camaro, a Chevrolet Camaro. And back then, for a 16-year-old to get a car like that was pretty special and pretty neat. But my dad was in the automobile business. And I remember I was so happy and I was so proud, to have that. And I'll never forget my youth pastor telling me, he said, Gary, he said, that's a great car you got. He said, you're really proud of it, aren't you? I said, yeah, I am. He said, have you given it to Jesus? He said, have you just said, Jesus, this is your car. I'm going to go where you want me to go. I'm going to use it for your purpose, for your will. And he planted the seed in my heart that everything. And I ended up leading a bunch of people, some of my peers, to Jesus in that car.
That's cool.
I'd take them for a ride and have a captive audience. And but the concept of everything that we have is the Lord's began to develop in my heart at that point. And I'm sure other people can think of similar things where God says, I want that.
Yeah. I had a dented Cavalier. I'm just messing. But hey, you got to give it to Jesus, right?
Yeah. Well, the world changed. Now, I do want to clarify. The world changed when I started having to buy them myself.
Indeed. But Well, I mean, it's a good example. I mean, we need to submit everything and give everything to Christ. And what that looks like, you know. What did Paul say? I die daily. Take up the cross.
Right.
Right? All right, so Mary's gift on page 10 is also an illustration of humble service. It says in verse 3, Mary pours this perfume on Jesus' feet. John mentions this twice. And he states that she wiped his feet with her hair. An act of great humility here. And in spite of her extravagant love, Mary never lost sight of the glory of Jesus. Sometimes we can lose sight of Jesus, don't we? But in this case, she's pouring all of herself out with that expensive oil. And she doesn't lose sight of his glory. And it's taken, she takes this act with deep reverence. When we come to God, we really need to be in deep reverence, don't we? And she's at the feet of Jesus here. Can you imagine yourself at the feet of Jesus, what you would do? You realize one day you will be in front of Jesus, right?
You know, another lesson I see here, Adam, that you just mentioned that she wiped it with her hair. I don't want to just read too much into this, but when you can pull a spiritual truth out of a story like this. But, I mean, think about it. This was an expensive perfume with no doubt an incredible fragrance. And the fact that she wiped his feet with her hair meant that the fragrance got on her. And the truth that I just pick up here is that everywhere she went for the next few days, people were going, hey, Jesus passed by here the other day, and you know, you smell, you must have been with Jesus. In other words,
that's a good point.
People could tell that she had been with Jesus. And it just, you know, it begs the question, can people tell when we've been with Jesus?
That's a great point. So let's say you're at Walmart. You know, there's a lot of opportunities we get to show Christ's love when we're standing in line for like hours at Walmart. Have you ever been, the lines have been backed up for a long ways? Sometimes I like to try to take that opportunity to speak to somebody and that kind of thing. There's times that we are just out and about that we need to just show Christ's love when somebody cuts us off on the freeway or something like that. Have you ever had the opportunity to show his love to other people when you're out and about around these other people? Has anybody got a good story to tell? No?
How can people tell if we've been with Jesus? Obviously, we don't have perfume on the same that he had, but if it's not a fragrance thing, what is it that about us that might indicate that we have been spending some time with Jesus?
Is it our attitude?
Anybody got a thought on that? Right? Absolutely.
There you go.
Amen.
There you go.
That's wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Yep. So that's how
they see, and I think they hit on it, that whenever we've spent time with the Lord so that we're just sort of acting like he would act, have the attitudes that, that would be consistent with him. If we love, you love like Jesus loved, You serve. How about the way we serve? You serve like Jesus served. Mm-hmm. You give like Jesus gave. You talk like Jesus. These are ways that people can tell if we've been with the Lord.
Good point.
It's our attitude, our actions, our words. It's all of the above. All the things y'all have mentioned.
I had a friend of mine who, and he called me up. He said, "Hey, I just invited this guy to live at my house that was homeless." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." He was freshly saved, and he was enthusiastic about it. And so he's like, he's just going to be doing some work around my house, and I want to help him out and that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, well, just keep me posted on how this goes, because nowadays you don't know. But he said over the course, and this is a guy I discipled, and he said over the course of him putting some flooring in for him and do some repairs around the house, he said the guy came back to me, and he's like, he's not saved, but he said, "You're the first guy that ever practiced what he preached." Can they say that about us? That we practice what we preach, And I said, listen, that's a testament to you following Christ. I said, he gets the glory for that, And I said, just keep pouring into that man. So he didn't get saved, but there was a seed planted. And sometimes that's what happens. When they see us act like Jesus, there's a seed planted. Saying, this person really lives what they believe. And I think we can do that. We got to live what we believe. All right, so that's talking about her humble service, because we're and it kind of alludes to what's going to go on in the next chapter, where Jesus humbles himself and washes the feet of his disciples. Then he commands them to go and do likewise. So, that's one of the things that we need to take into account, that loving on each other also shows who Jesus is to other people. What did he say? They'll know that you're mine by the love you show for one another, right? Paraphrasing. All right. Mary's gift is a rebuke to self-centered religion. John intends for us to see a contrast. John likes using contrasts here, especially with light and dark. Looking at John 3:20 and 21, it says, "For everyone who does evil hates the light and avoids it, so that his deeds may not be exposed. But anyone who lives by the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be shown to be accomplished by God." Do we see that as a truth? Do we know that the people that are doing some bad stuff want to keep it in the dark? And the stuff that's we need to be doing accomplishes what God wants to do in the light? So John's using that contrast. So he's contrasting here. He's talking about Mary, then he mentions Judas. And we all know what Judas did, right? And John actually mentions that. So Judas does wicked things and hates, even condemns, and then betrays the light. And Mary's come to light, and it's clear her works have been carried out by the grace and power of God. Mary's love rings authentic. And that's one of the things that we need to be, is authentic. Who likes somebody who's fake and you know they're fake? Do we know fake people? I see a lot of heads going up and down. We do, don't we? This is real authentic worship. Authenticity means a lot to us, doesn't it?
It's interesting that Judas's hypocrisy did not keep the other disciples from fulfilling their mission. And it did not keep Mary from expressing her love. It's just an interesting thought, because I've heard some people say, well, I'm not going to go to church anymore because of the hypocrites.
Oh my goodness, yes.
I'm not going to do this or that because of the hypocrites. And my contention is that, first of all, people go to the grocery store, and hypocrites go there.
Mm-hmm.
And they go to the bank, and hypocrites go there.
Yep.
Why? But people use that as an excuse. But I guess the point I'm trying to see here is that the disciples were not dissuaded or discouraged because Judas was the way he was, and neither was Mary.
They all probably knew he was like that too.
Yeah.
I mean, John especially, mentioning it here. What happens when we focus on our stuff? Who do we take the focus off of? Do we do that? We do, don't we? Sometimes we can focus on our stuff, but Judas serves as a warning here. He looked and spoke the part of a disciple. So we can look like a disciple of Christ, right? He was with them. He heard everything. He was in charge of the money box. He has little responsibilities and stuff like that. So we can look like it, but who knows the real difference? Jesus knows the difference in each and every one of us, where we really stand. Judas looks good on the outside.
And it's interesting that people that live like that not only avoid the light because their deeds are evil, Jesus said, but man, they have such a tendency to criticize the light. And you see that illustrated here. I mean, who was the first to criticize Mary? Why have you wasted? Why did you pour that out? You've wasted a year's, that had a year's value to it. And you poured it all out. I mean, he was the one that was critical. And that's normally the case. I've said before, nothing will make hypocrites in a church rise to the surface like dead fish in a lake quicker than revival. When God starts moving in the hearts and lives of people in the church, there will be some people who will find every little nitpicking thing to criticize. And you see that illustrated here in the way Judas responded to Mary's extravagant love.
Yeah.
It's just something I've observed over the years.
And that's true. I mean, even in my short stint in ministry, you can see a lot of that happening.
Yeah.
But it happens other places too. We can see it sometimes at work and stuff like that. There'll be critics step up and that kind of thing.
Right.
But a lot of it is shown in ministry. So that's why I kind of focused on the self-centered religion, because when it boils down to, Judas was concerned about who? Himself. He was concerned about what he can get out of this versus what Mary was trying to get out of it, which was just glorifying God. She knew who Jesus was. She was authentic about what she was doing. She was reverent about what she was doing. And she just laid herself down at his feet and poured all of it out for his glory. But again, John likes the contrast. And I'm glad he does contrast, because it shows us what's really valuable and what Jesus values over anything else. He said, I'm not always going to be here. So that fragrance that she pours out, do you think you could smell that all over the room? And like he said, it's going to be on her too, because she was taking her hair and wiping it with his feet. So love has an undeniable fragrance. When you smell it, you want it to linger there. Can we all agree with that? Mm-hmm. Do you like to be loved? So does God. And he knew exactly where Mary's heart was. And that's where our heart needs to be. Pouring it all out for him, because he gave it all for us. He doesn't want just words. He doesn't want the look of a disciple. He wants an actual disciple. He don't want you to be fake. He knows you're not being real. You may look good, like I said, to everybody else. You may have everybody else fooled, but you don't have God fooled. So the true, authentic love that Mary showed here, that's what he wants. And he wants from everybody in this room. So one of these days, that fragrance of love is going to fill the whole world. I'm excited about it. So.
Way, I foresee this. Not. Adam's going to teach us the truth from it. Is that what God has shown us? And I will, throughout these Sunday night studies, you feel free to do that as well. There's a couple of little truths that the Lord showed me tonight that I don't know that I've seen before, and I preach from something new. And one of the things is that in my Bible, I've got one of these red print Bibles of the words of Jesus. And in that whole story, there's only 2 verses right there. He spoke. This illustrated the impending death, or spoke about the impending death of the Lord Jesus. What I don't want to be, morbid, but we embalm people from the inside. Over the bodies, serve the body for the appropriate mourning period. This was a perfume that was customary and common in that day. Taken. When and the next morning, a group of the Bible says to prepare his body. In the burial process to the body of Jesus. That's what they're. Ladies that went to the tomb that morning get for that. How often do we wait?
True.
But she did it when he could appreciate it, when he could be. Here we have the story of it. All right, any other comments or questions? We're about to wrap up and conclude. Right? You can get smell of the world on you.
That's a good point, yeah. after the resurrection. So kind of a precursor to look at. I like that little picture.
Fun little different way to have a Bible study, just in